I'm Mark Cann, the founder of Hyper.com, and I'm joined today by Sophie Tully. Sophie Tully is one of the magnificent people who has worked on the nutrition and diet part of Hyper Energy. And so I wanted to delve a little bit more into the person behind the profile and find a little bit more about your background and what you've been up to. So, welcome today, Sophie. And if you could just tell us a little bit about your life story relating to nutrition and diet.
Ooh, that's a big ask. Okay, so yes, I started my career as a biomedical scientist. Worked in a lab as a research scientist for 4 years, and then sort of had lots of my own health revelations, and decided to go back to uni and do a master's in clinical nutrition. And then through my career, I've worked with lots of wonderful people. And it was sort of later on in my career that I was then diagnosed with ADHD. And I used my knowledge of nutrition and diet and all of these things and my own kind of health struggles and how it's all interrelated to then do what I do now, which is support people who have ADHD, other neurodivergent conditions, mental health issues in particular. So yeah, it's been sort of a long, and as is with the often the way with ADHD, an ever evolving journey, which is based on kind of personal experience.
Yeah, so you were diagnosed with ADHD earlier in life, but you also practice and treat those with ADHD. What did you find that your personal experiences were with the health services when you found out?
Um, well, first and foremost, I was highly impatient. So I was like, right, I'm pretty sure I have ADHD. I'm just going to go and get a private diagnosis because I can't deal with this whole waiting for 2 years. But I think, I was only diagnosed a few years back now, but even then it still felt like it was still kind of relatively unknown, and particularly in women as well. It was very much a like, oh, you couldn't possibly have ADHD. You're like really intelligent and you've got like 3 degrees, and you know what you're doing. And it was like interesting. So yeah, it was a bit of a mixed bag there. And I actually, being the geeky scientist that I am, had to go to my doctor with like scientific papers to say, this is what's wrong with me, and here's why I believe this, and here's all of the things that you need to do to diagnose me. So, yeah, it's an interesting one.
And just generally, culturally at the moment, where there's a lot of sort of people saying phrases with, I think I'm a little bit ADHD. What do you think are some of the misconceptions of like undiagnosed ADHD?
I think for people who don't really know what ADHD is or think they might be a bit ADHD, a lot of it is just that we're like super distractible and that we just need a bit more self control. And, if we just paid more attention, or if we just tried harder, or if we were just a little bit more organized, we'd be able to figure it out. But what everybody who doesn't have a diagnosis of ADHD, or actually doesn't have ADHD, doesn't realize is the constant inner battle of the ADHD individual. Like, we're not sitting there going, oh, yay, I'm on my phone again. Woohoo, isn't this amazing? We're sitting there going, I physically cannot move and I want to be doing anything but sitting here, being completely stuck in inertia. And we really just want to do whatever it is that the rest of the world is looking at us going, oh, why can't you just get up off your bum and do that? But I think that's the real key between having ADHD and just having a few traits, is the impact on your life that it has, and the sort of level of debilitation. And what people don't realize, when you actually look at the diagnostic criteria for ADHD, it's not just, do you have these symptoms? Can you prove that that was, something that's been with you since childhood? They actually look at the impact. So they're like, okay, well, you do find it difficult to stay attentive on a specific task, but is this negatively impacting your life? And that's the difference. That's like, yeah, okay, we live in a distracting world, but is it having a negative impact on you? And I think that's where the kind of real important factor is.
Yeah. Definitely. And what do you think someone who has undiagnosed ADHD and perhaps they're like on a waiting list to see someone, what can they do today to improve their life in this sort of 1 to 2 years they're waiting?
Well, from a sort of lifestyle perspective, the very best and freest medicine for ADHD is to move, which I think you'll agree with, and sleep. Just sleep as much as you can. We generally are exhausted as ADHD individuals, and the more sleep you can get, which I know isn't always easy with ADHD, the better. But sleep and movement are two of the best medicines. But the real key is to just be as informed as possible. Like, get out there, listen to the podcasts, read the books, find the information that's going to help you to understand you. Because most people, when they get diagnosed with ADHD, they have an idea of what's going on, but it's not until you get into the books, you get into the research, you start listening to other people's stories, you start hearing professionals talking about what ADHD really means, that you start going, oh, wow. Like, ADHD is actually so many things. So being as informed and learning and just absorbing like a sponge, like, what is ADHD and how does it impact me? That's really important.
Yeah, because I think a lot of healthcare professionals in the UK in particular, perhaps there's still like a lack of education at sort of a general practitioner level, or at least kind of I've experienced that, and I think the NHS do an amazing job, and that but that's GPs have actually disclosed that to me. So I think what do you think could be done to kind of increase the awareness and kind of make sure that there's not like a misdiagnosis for individuals, especially adults, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's all just about learning and being informed and understanding, and it goes two ways. Like, doctors need to be receptive to the fact that people coming into their offices probably know more than they do about certain topics, because it's your lived experience and they can't be experts on everything. That's why GPs are on their knees, because they're expected to know everything about everything, and it's physically impossible. Trust me, I've tried. Um, but it's also about you as the individual taking responsibility. And like I said, when I first got diagnosed, I went to the professionals and said, this is what I think is going on for me. Here's why. Here's what is going on for me. So I think it's really important that we're more engaged with that process ourselves, that we're saying, I think I have ADHD, but here's why, and here's, so that you're not just rocking up and expecting this person to know everything and then getting angry that they don't. It's about actually saying, well, I've done the background, I've done the legwork. I want this to be a two-way conversation where I can say, this is my experience, this is what's going on, and they can go, aha, that's interesting, let's check that out and let's explore that. So it's about making it a conversation rather than it just being I think I've got this thing, you should diagnose me, and I'm going to be annoyed if you don't do that right.
Yep. No, definitely. And I think some people who have been diagnosed post diagnosis are anti-medication. Do you think this is like a lack of understanding or something else, the reason behind it?
I think there's a lot of controversy around ADHD medications. A lot of it's down to misunderstanding. It's also down to stigma. There's obviously some camps of people that are like, well, there's actually nothing wrong with my brain. You're just medicating me to kind of placate me and get me to fit into a box of, like, society's expectations of how a human being should behave. Um, there's also obviously the whole, abuse of ADHD meds. Like, everybody's addicted to Adderall, and it's all sort of your middle class teenagers and 20 somethings that are trying to just, max it out. So there's a lot that's really gone wrong in the world. I think there's also been, as with anything, you only hear the bad stuff, don't you? So you hear about the people that have taken the medications and they've had horrendous side effects, or they've been zombified. And I think the difficulty with where we're at the moment in the ADHD community is that there's still very much the focus on children, and a lot of people like, oh, I don't want to drug up my children, I don't want to turn them into little zombies, and that's an absolutely fair opinion. So yeah, there's so many reasons, and most of it is based on misinformation basically, and people having views and opinions on something that isn't their own personal experience.
I think you hit on a really interesting point there. So, if we talk about these two groups of people, so adults who are taking ADHD meds like Adderall and other kind of very sort of trendy ones that you kind of hear about that don't have a diagnosis. They may or may not, but let's just say for argument's sake that they don't have ADHD. And then you've got another adult who actually has been prescribed by, a GP or, an MD in the US. What is the difference in terms of how these stimulant-based medications actually like affect their brain and their ability to operate on a day-to-day basis?
Oh, good question.
Well, I was just thinking that that discussion, even if it's not like I know we don't have an exact science on this person definitely has ADHD, but just everybody taking it is a bit like saying, well, everybody should go out and take a coffee, even if they don't actually drink caffeine.
Well, yeah, and I was going to use coffee to kind of liken the situation because it's very much individual. Know that there are people out there who don't have ADHD who will take Ritalin, Adderall, whatever you want to call it, depending on the country you're in. And yeah, they'll be like on it for 6 hours, tapping it out, same as, an ADHD individual in hyperfocus, they're not going to look up, they're not going to breathe, they're not going to eat, and it's going to be amazing. But there's other people that will take that don't have ADHD, and they literally end up crawling into a corner and having like a panic attack because it's too much. And it's the same with ADHD individuals. Some of us, we take it and it's the best thing. It calms your brain down, it shuts out all of the noise, it allows you to just focus on the things that you need to focus on. But then there's other ADHD people who will take it where it calms down the noise so much that you actually can't think of anything anymore. Or for a lot of people who take with ADHD who take stimulants, it can calm you down to the point where you actually need to go to sleep. And that's happened to me. I've taken stimulant meds and then needed a nap for like 4 hours because my nervous system has gone, oh, wow, this is amazing. So I guess the long and short of it is stimulants in ADHD actually calm us down and filter the excess noise and information. Whereas people without ADHD, it sort of just like gives you like a hyper focus, an intense level of mental energy and ability to sort of go. But of course, as I said, there's people on both ends of the spectrum where it's going to make you feel awful. It's not going to work. So it's very much an individual thing.
Yeah. And for those who have like opted to not take stimulant or even non-stimulant ADHD meds, is there a few simple principles that they can follow for like managing their ADHD symptoms on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I think further to what we already talked about moving and getting as much sleep as possible, or getting good quality sleep, there's obviously eating well, which I know we're going to go into in more detail at the moment. But the food that you put into your body really is the resources that your body then uses to do everything, to make brain chemicals, to create energy, to give you focus and attention. But I think one of the really key things that is still not quite there, particularly in the adult ADHD world, is getting support. So finding the people, the communities, the tools you need to learn how to live with your ADHD, not try and change your brain. Like your brain is the way it is, and it doesn't matter how neurotypical you try and become or how angry you get at the thing that isn't working for you, it's not going to change. So
No.
figuring out from a lifestyle perspective, becoming really self-aware, what makes my symptoms worse, what makes them better, really dialing in and being like, oh, yesterday was a really good day. Why was yesterday a really good day? Okay, I got up at X time, I went for a walk in the morning, I ate a really good healthy protein rich breakfast, I didn't start the day on my, all of these things. So self-awareness is something that as a coach I'm always hammering on about, but it's really, really key, because the more self-aware you become, the easier it is basically to manifest the life that you want effectively.
Yeah, I think ADHD adults with ADHD give themselves a hard time if they don't achieve a certain amount of perfection, and I think there's something to be said for keep on showing up. Is what I like to say. So, as in, like yesterday was a bit shit. Let's show up today and make it a bit better.
Absolutely. And asking yourself, okay, well, if yesterday was shit, why was yesterday shit? And if it was shit, why was it not as shit or shitter than the day before, you know? So just really getting to know what you need and what you need more of and what you need less of, basically.
Definitely. And one of the main ADHD symptoms around impulsivity. Do you find in your studies and working with patients that certain foods or food groups increase the impulsivity symptoms that adults with ADHD have?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's very much an individual thing. Everybody's going to be different, but research wise, and then kind of, personal and professional experience, the key ones to look out for are food additives and colorings. So things like E numbers, preservatives, all of the stuff that shouldn't be in food, but often is. Gluten is also a major one for a lot of people. It was actually one of the key ones for me for my ADHD symptoms. I find gluten more so with the neurological stuff than impulsivity specifically. But yeah, gluten can really mess some people up, but other people it's absolutely fine. Same with dairy. Some people cannot handle dairy, but other people can eat it till, excuse the pun, the cows come home. And then, of course, like sugar, because it sort of gives you this wallop of energy, and then you crash and you're like, "Ah." But then on the flip side of that as well, artificial sweeteners are the key ones. So yeah, there's so many foods, and the thing I would say is, if impulsivity, hyperactivity, that what's the term that I'm thinking of? Oh, here we go. Good example of an ADHD brain at work. Um, Control of sort of initiation of something you want to do, or resisting doing something. So exactly the impulsivity, but being able to prevent that from happening. um if that is something that you're really struggling with and you feel that it could be food related, then keeping a food and symptom diary is a really useful tool. Just scribble everything down, scribble down symptoms, and that can just help you get to the root of what foods might be triggering for you.
Yep. Okay, let's get on to foods, I think. So, what do you think is a good starting point for somebody who wants to perhaps improve their diet, but they don't want to get overwhelmed, confused, or they might even have concerns around costs and budget?
Yeah, so I think the number one thing is to try and make your diet as natural as possible. So you want to be eating animal proteins if that's your thing, or plant proteins, lots of fruits and veggies, but things that aren't meddled with by man, basically. So if it vaguely or as close as possible resembles the food that came out the ground, off the tree, or out of the, off the bush, from the animal, then eat it. But it's when we get into this horrible place we're in now, where everything is like a million different ingredients, and 50% of those ingredients are not actual foods, they're like chemicals and products, and then it's packaged and it's wrapped in something, and it's marketed. Basically, if a food needs to be marketed, you probably shouldn't eat it. And that's a golden rule. So I think it's just about simplifying it, going back to basics, trying to just eat real food and making sure that it's a good balance of food. So you're hitting all of the food groups across the day, rather than just living on carbs or whatever. And
And there's a lot of talk about protein. How does protein impact like how the brain works?
So protein is absolutely key. Protein is what provides the building blocks for the chemical messengers that communicate information throughout the body, but particularly in the brain and the nervous system. So your neurochemicals like dopamine, which we hear a lot about in the ADHD world, that's actually built from protein. So we eat protein rich food, we digest the food, our gut bacteria then helps us to make dopamine and another neurochemical called GABA, which is really important in ADHD because it calms us down and makes us like more relaxed. So absolutely key. Protein is, as I say, the building block of all of our chemical messengers. So it makes things happen in the body, basically.
Got it. And the in terms of you were talking about dopamine, I think it's an important thing to sort of touch on is that with a lot of the discussions around dopamine is that if adults with ADHD have a dopamine deficiency, but for I know from our conversations you've talked about the conversion of dopamine to is it norepinephrine and noradrenaline? Be good to sort of just touch on that a bit because I think it's fascinating for me personally at least.
Yeah, and I think it's a very, very exciting area of science, and I do genetic analysis as a branch of my clinical work. But yeah, ADHD comes from different places in everybody, and whilst most ADHD individuals have issues with their dopamine signaling, as you've said, it's not always a shortage of dopamine. So some people have ample dopamine, but the receptors that are effectively the docking stations in the brain that allow dopamine to do its job, they might not be working very well. Or you might have a lot of dopamine, but dopamine doesn't work on its own. So we need dopamine to work with the other neurochemicals. So we need a bit of serotonin, which makes us happy, which gives us pleasure from the things that we do, which makes us actually want to do them in the first place, gives us positive feedback. But then there's also noradrenaline. So noradrenaline is like the precursor to adrenaline, and dopamine and noradrenaline work together to give you a sense of purpose and get motivation and reward. But noradrenaline is really key for like sustained mental effort. So you need your dopamine to be like, I really want to do that, but you need your noradrenaline as well to want you to stay doing it once you've started, basically. So there's a gene that we talked about that's actually involved in turning dopamine into noradrenaline. So for some people, that gene doesn't work very well. Which basically means you might have all the motivation in the world, you might sit down to do something, but that's when you're going to get distracted and you're going to wander off mentally because you haven't got the noradrenaline to keep you there.
Okay. Yeah.
And another key symptom of that as well, low noradrenaline conversion is associated with a lot of the fatigue that comes with ADHD as well. So lots of people that end up easily exhausted and overwhelmed, that can be sort of a disconnect between dopamine and noradrenaline. So it's not clear cut. It's not just about dopamine. It's not just about not having enough dopamine. There's so many things going on, and that's different for everybody, which is why it's so hard to sometimes get it right.
And I think you brought a really interesting point there because let's talk through the motions. So let's say you get started on a task because we work a lot with people at Hyper who are in sort of office-based roles on laptops, working from home, that kind of thing. And you've already got to your desk, so you're probably a fairly disciplined person in terms of like showing up and wanting to do the work. But is there something around that conversion of dopamine to noradrenaline that means that the actually getting the task started or continuing it means that you might get distracted and start like another task? Is that kind of something to do with how that's all set up, or?
Um, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things going on there. I mean, it can be everything from what's in your environment to your neurochemistry and, how balanced your different neurochemicals are. Um, But Yeah, I think the real key there is again this sort of this dialing in and this understanding, like for me, what are the triggers, what are the distractions, like where is this coming from? Um, but from a neurochemistry perspective, absolutely. Yeah, it's that balance between having, so we can sort of almost think about our brain chemicals in the doing and the staying type actions. So dopamine and noradrenaline, to some extent, they're the doing. They're the ones that give you the desire, the motivation. But then you need, like, as I said, GABA, serotonin, and noradrenaline together to stay there. So a lot of people with ADHD, as you've identified, the struggle isn't like the motivation and the starting or the task initiation. It's the once I'm in that, realizing or being able to stay there, not having impulsivity and hyperactivity and kind of intrusive thoughts that are coming from the low serotonin or the fast dopamine use, because that's one of the other problems with dopamine is it's not always that we have short supply, but we burn through it really quickly, so it runs out fast. So that's kind of where the beauty of nutrition in particular is you can actually strengthen your brain biochemistry, as we talked about in particular with protein. Eating lots of protein rich foods gives your brain more of the building blocks to make all of the brain chemistry that's going to help to keep you there once you're there, if you got there in the first place, or get you there if you didn't get there in the first place.
So, do we need to then think about adults with ADHD having a higher intake of protein outside of, like, I'm going to have an egg or, like a bit of chicken or something? Do they need to be supplementing or looking at protein shakes, that kind of thing? Or
I don't think it's necessary for every adult or individual with ADHD to be supplementing, but it can be useful. Certainly, if you know your own genetics and your own biochemistry, it can be helpful to experiment. Certainly, if you're also somebody who isn't very good at eating real food, because energy planning, organization, all of that stuff, then that's where high quality protein shakes, those kinds of things can be really beneficial. I'm very much a food first nutritionist, so I would always say eat protein, but eat it regularly. So make sure that you're having protein breakfast, lunch, dinner, maybe a couple of snacks as well. So fundamentally, no, but yes, on an individual basis, individual amino acids or a broader spectrum protein supplement can be really helpful for some people.
so, yeah, can you talk a little bit about the role of omega-3 fatty acids in ADHD management?
Yeah, so omega-3s are a specific type of fat, and the main reason why they're so important in ADHD is because they're a really fundamental, important structural component of the cells that make up the brain and the nervous system. And omega-3s in particular, they are what make your cells kind of fluid and flexible. And the more you don't want them too fluid and flexible, but you want them fluid and flexible enough that it's so nice and puffy and bouncy so that they can receive and transmit information and nutrients can move in and out of your cells. And it's nutrients that then communicate information, make things happen. So omega-3s are heavily correlated with ADHD symptoms. So most of the research now confirms that ADHD symptoms are inversely related with ADHD symptom severity. Sorry, so omega-3 status and ADHD symptom severity are inversely, and by that I mean when one is high the other is low. So if you've got good omega-3 status, your ADHD symptoms are likely to be lower, and that's because you need these wonderful fats to nourish and strengthen your brain and nervous system cells so that information can seamlessly flow from one neuron in the brain to the next.
Yep, definitely. And then let's talk about coffee and caffeine. What sort of impact does caffeine have on ADHD symptoms?
It varies. But yeah, most ADHDers tend to love a good cup of coffee. I certainly did before they drank so much of it that it now frazzled them. But most of the time we find that it does it gives us that boost of kind of focus, concentration, can help overcome some of that desire to not do anything. So it gives you that motivation to initiate a task, gives you just a little bit more mental clarity and focus. And it does that by raising cortisol, which is a stress hormone, which actually in short bursts, when we have slightly higher stress, it slows down how quickly we use up our neurochemistry, our brain chemicals, so dopamine in particular, which is why it can be beneficial. Why we're also very good often in an acute crisis or stressful event, because the speed at which our dopamine is kind of filtering out is reduced. So we feel that focus, alert, on it, ready for action. The problem obviously then becomes when you drink too much and you're drinking it consistently, because that stress then starts to flood and overwhelm the system. So short term and low intakes can be beneficial. But as with, key take home message here from everything I'm going to say is find what works for you. For me, I can only have one coffee a day, and that can't even be a full strength coffee, but that's enough to get me going in the morning. If I have any more than that, I just am wound up and then I need an afternoon nap. So just figure out what works for you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, personally, I cut down a lot of my coffee intake and I still have caffeine, but I've supplemented it with a lower sort of caffeine drink. So I'll have like yerba mate tea, which is still lovely, but it's actually much better in terms of the caffeine content in there and stuff. And so yeah, that's kind of what I've personally found works for me. But I do love a cup of coffee, just not too much of it. Um, so there is a lot of talk about mushrooms, and I see it on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook ads, you name it. Is there any research or substantial kind of evidence that shows that, certain type of mushrooms help with ADHD symptoms or
So the main one that's looking very promising is lion's mane. And actually, yeah, there's some really good research coming out in lion's mane showing that it can support cognitive function. It can support, the strength of neurons firing. They're starting to look at it in terms of, preventing the progression of cognitive decline and Alzheimer's. I think the important thing with anything kind of nutrition related and like very specific individual supplements is that the the place we have to get to in terms of research being conducted is always like years away. So the great thing about lion's mane and other medicinal mushrooms is they're very safe. Um, if you buy high quality ones, they can be very, very helpful as part of a broader picture. And I think that's the thing. It's really important that we don't see any one thing as like the golden ticket or the, replacement for other proven therapies. So yes, there's some amazing research coming through. Yes, as part of a broader picture, they can be really helpful, but alone taking lion's mane every day isn't going to cure your ADHD. I mean, you can't do that, but
no? And I think there's kind of an argument to suggest that if you're trying a lot of different things at once, it's very going to be very hard to know, is it like the improved diet with your good fatty acids and your increased protein, or was it that lion's mane mushroom supplement that you had? That's, I guess, how do people sort of navigate that and actually kind of stick with it as well? Because it's very up and down, isn't it, in terms of what's going to work and what isn't.
yeah, absolutely. And one of the conversations I always have with clients is to try and think of yourself as a pyramid. So on the base of the pyramid, you need things like good sleep, a healthy, balanced diet, good social support networks, all of those boring things that no one's interested about. If you try and put the top of the pyramid, which is these very specific, very targeted nutritional supplements, it's just going to fall off. You're not going to notice any benefits there. So you need to strengthen those foundations. You need to make sure that you're doing the boring stuff, but the really fundamental, like literally cornerstone things before you're going to see major benefits. And I think that's again where the nutrition world gets a bad reputation, because a lot of what we see in the press, in marketing, coming out of shops is, this supplement's going to change your life. And it's like, well, not if you've got a really bad diet and you don't sleep and, all of these things. So I think it's important to recognize that they play a really useful role. But yes, absolutely, you're not going to see the benefits of one thing in isolation if you haven't got a good kind of foundation.
Sure, sure. And Sophie, you've done a lot of research on the digestive system and how that affects the brain. First of all, what do you think that we'll look back in, say, 5 or 10 years and say, I wonder why people didn't do X back then, and just it all sort of baffle us?
I think the key thing will be like, I wonder why people just didn't eat fiber-rich foods. Yeah, that's a key one for the digestive system. Just eat real food. Yeah, I think that's the real thing, is like, where did it all go wrong? At what point? And I know where it went wrong. It went wrong in the 80s when sugar and like all of the regulations kind of went out the window. But yeah, I think the key thing from a digestive health perspective is that your gut loves fiber. It loves fruits, vegetables. It loves, beans, pulses, healthy whole grains, and all of the things that feed the digestive tract. And we've lost our way, and we're not realizing how fundamental the digestive tract is in terms of full body health. So yeah, eating real food is where we all went wrong.
And what are the effects of eating fermented foods such as your yogurt, kimchi, sauerkraut, the ones that contain probiotics?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head there. They contain probiotics, and probiotics are effectively, so pro and biotics. So it's pro, and the biotic is the bacterial families that live in the digestive tract. So fermented foods are naturally rich in probiotics, which help to strengthen and diversify the good bacteria in your digestive tract. And these guys do everything. They do everything from helping to break down your food so you can absorb nutrients better. So vitamin B12, for example, is really, really important in ADHD. And our gut bacteria are involved in helping us to unlock and get hold of that B12, but also making GABA, which we talked about. So GABA is a key neurochemical, and it's actually like nature's kind of chill pill. It's the Zen neurochemistry that allows you to relax, unwind, switch off, which is very difficult for a lot of ADHD brains. And your gut bacteria are absolutely key to this process. So they actually are heavily involved in making GABA. And so when we've got unhappy bacterial balance in our digestive tract, all of these processes can't function. So fermented foods help to strengthen the good bacteria, help to make sure there's lots of different versions of the good bacteria so that we can make these neurochemicals, we can digest food properly. They're also really important for our immune system. So when your body and your digestive tract are spending a lot of energy fighting bugs, that can distract from energy for the brain and making you feel good. So having a healthy, probiotic rich environment in the gut helps to just keep everything ticking over much more efficiently.
And let's say somebody starts eating fermented foods or even taking like a probiotic supplement, what sort of time frames do they need to be, paying attention to before they sort of notice a difference?
Well, in theory, they should start sort of exerting their benefits fairly quickly. Probiotics don't actually sort of hang around in the gut too long, which is why you need to keep eating them. So you can't sort of eat them every day for a month and then never do it again. You have to continue to eat them. But it really, again, depends on the individual and what benefits and how dysbiotic is the term when things are all out of kilter and out of balance your digestive tract is to begin with. So some people might start to feel something. I'm not going to say benefits because you don't know what's going to happen, but you'll start to notice things within a few days, maybe even a few hours, depending on what's going on for you. But for people who do have quite upset bacterial balance, it can take a few weeks before they start to really notice. And I think the key as well is it can actually start off feeling like, oh my goodness, this is making things worse. But usually over time, it settles down and it's better at the other side.
And is there like an ideal diet that a lot of us know we should follow, but is there a compromise for like real life and what's actually going to happen, basically?
Yeah, I think always, that being said, I think there's so much information out there. Today, everybody's trying to sell you the perfect diet, and nobody knows anymore. Like, should I be vegan? Should I be keto? And I think the key take home is just eat real food. So make sure that it's real food. And if it makes you feel good, then you're doing the right thing. And by good, I mean clear head, abundant energy, good sleep, healthy skin. I don't mean, yeah, awesome pizza. That's great. I mean, like, it's got to make you feel good inside and out. Um, but yes, of course, there's a compromise in real life. You've got to live. We live in a world surrounded by delicious things. So you've got to make sure that there's an element of enjoying yourself there. I always say to people, I was a foodie before I was a nutritionist. I worked for like 12 years in hospitality before I became a nutritionist. So I know the importance of delicious food, and delicious food isn't always healthy food. But I think, yeah, if you can take the concepts of like try and make it as natural and real as possible, and then when you're not having the as natural, try and up the quality. So like if you're gonna buy a pizza, buy a really good pizza that's got like high quality ingredients and really enjoy it and savor every moment of it. Don't make yourself feel bad. If you're going to indulge properly and enjoy every morsel. So yeah, definitely find your happy medium between enjoying but also optimizing.
Yep, definitely. And so vitamin B within supplements is talked about a lot. What are some of the basics that people need to know about like how it affects our brain and also like what type of vitamin B do they need to be buying, you know?
Yeah, so I would say as a starting point, if people are like, I need to go and buy a supplement, you just want to buy a really high quality methylated B complex. And, this may sound like, but if you Google methylated B complex, you'll come up with lots of really good options. But the reason for that, so all of the B vitamins are really important in making our brain chemicals. And if you sort of take high doses of one and not any of the other, you can soon cause yourself a bit of a brain imbalance. And um, the methylated aspect is because that is in the form that the body can use straight away. So your your biology doesn't have to do anything extra to that vitamin to make it active and ready to go. But some of the really important ones are vitamin B6. So that's really key for making neurotransmitters. In like really useful in particular for sort of making serotonin, turning serotonin into melatonin, which helps us sleep, which is really important. B12 and folate are the key ones. So vitamin B12 and folate are actually really, really important for again, like mental health, full body health, digestive health, making brain chemistry. So they're the sort of key ones that people are like, ADHD, it's got to be folate, B12, B6. But actually, if you neglect the other ones, you're not really doing yourself any favors.
And on that, I think so. Supplements are often marketed as a solution, but they really vary in like quality and effectiveness. I mean, what do you need to know when buying supplements online?
That if it's really cheap, it probably won't work. um, that um, it's so difficult. Some of them, if the doses seem insanely high, that's probably not good, but they also can be really low. So I've seen supplements online that's like, multivitamin and mineral with everything that you need. And then I look at the ingredients and I'm like, but there's like less than 20% of the RDA in here, and it's all in really bad forms. So tell you what, the one piece of really awesome advice I can give you is to check out a website called examine.com. This is a bunch of awesome scientific minded individuals who basically said, what's wrong with the nutrition world? So there's an entire website. So any supplement that you're thinking about taking, you can type it in, you can go on their website, and it's like a scientific review on the dosage, the form, what works, what doesn't work, the real science behind the benefits. So I think the key is to be informed. Don't just listen to the hype. Don't buy the cheapest one that you can find. If you can afford to like run something by a professional, great. If you There's loads of companies out there that like have their own kind of nutrition qualified customer support, so they're great companies to buy from these days because you can actually chat to them. So yeah, it's not an easy question to answer, but generally if it's cheap, it's not going to work. And be wary of like super high doses or low doses basically, because that's also a waste of time.
And a lot of the people who are watching this are going to be, I would imagine, in the UK, Europe, or the US. I mean, do you have preferred like vendors that you say, I could put my name or I trust that I would buy from there or send your patients there, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, there's some amazing brands out there. Just to list some of them that tend to go towards as a starting point, we've got Igenis Healthcare Nutrition are great. Uh, Thorn are generally great. We've got Life Extension and Doctors Best in the US. Then in the UK, Viridian are generally pretty decent. Um, Suddenly going blank. BioCare are often pretty good as well. It's like they do really good broad spectrum ones. From a probiotic perspective, I'm a massive fan of OptiBac. Um, so many amazing brands out there, but the problem is that a lot of the really good brands that practitioners like myself will recommend, they're not available in the high street. So if you go into Holland and Barrett, for example, 90% of what's in there, I would say don't touch with a barge pole. So if you're lucky enough to be able to afford to shop in good health food shops, then places like Whole Foods, Planet Organic, the ones that stock the higher end products, they're the products that are actually going to work. Now, you don't always need the super expensive ones because often they're really gimmicky as well and they're not worth good quality brands that you don't necessarily see in Boots, Holland and Barrett and other kind of high street shops.
Well, I mean, you said it yourself, like good supplements, good quality supplements come at a cost. Similar to how, you might have a limit to how much you want to spend on the gym or how much you want to spend on your monthly food shop. What would you say people should be looking at as a budget, a minimum budget to spend on supplements monthly or even a range?
I'd say if you're trying to cover all bases, so when it comes to ADHD, I'd say the majority of us benefit from an omega-3, a high quality B complex, even a high quality multivitamin and mineral that includes a full B complex, and maybe a probiotic. If you're buying decent, you're looking at 30 to 40 pounds a month for just those really good quality ones. Um, if you're then starting to add in more nuanced niche stuff based on your own knowledge of what something does and your own symptoms, then you're looking at kind of 50 to 100 pounds for really good quality stuff overall, but it doesn't have to cost that much. So I'd say, 30 to 50 pounds as a ballpark to tickle bases, maybe have a few like niche products in there, but you can get carried away. So depending on what, like saffron, for example, saffron is like really hot topic at the moment. It's one of the best kind of actually most scientifically proven supplements for ADHD. And 1 month's supply of that will set you back 30 quid. So it just depends on how far you want to go with it and actually, what you've got to spend. So
And I've got a few other supplements here that I'm going to run through, and then we'll wrap things up. So feel free to go into as much or as little detail as you want. So an L-tyrosine supplement.
yeah, so the reason loads of people supplement with L-tyrosine is because it's the direct precursor molecule to dopamine. So your brain uses tyrosine. So tyrosine is actually an amino acid, which is one of the building blocks of protein. Um, and so people supplement with tyrosine and hope that their brain is going to make more dopamine. Um, it can be wonderful for some people. If you're gonna try it, and I do recommend it to clients, I have used it myself. I recommend buying a powder so that you can play around with the dosage, because this is the other problem with supplements and medications, which is why a lot of people struggle with side effects and issues with things when they don't need to. Is there is no one size fits all. It's about your biochemistry, your metabolism. So tyrosine, I would say, can be very helpful for some people. Buy a high quality powder. I'm a big fan of bulk.com /UK because their single powder ingredient supplements are good quality. Um, but yeah, play around, give it sort of a few weeks to settle in, try and keep a track of your symptoms. And this is the other thing, just to throw that into the mix. You're not just going to miraculously notice with a lot of stuff that things have gotten better. So it can be really helpful when trying a supplement to pick specific things that that supplement's supposed to help with, and start off by like rating that every day for a few days without the supplement, then take the supplement and just give yourself a score out of 10 on whether it's like motivation, concentration, distractibility. Pick a few simple things, so because that then gives you a tangible like proof that something's helping or not helping, rather than just being like, oh yeah, I've been taking this for a month now, I don't know, maybe. So yeah, so something like that, it can kick in quite quickly for some people. Other people might need a little while. The one thing, the note of kind of caution, I would say, is it's a bit like, you think of your brain and your body as a big complex machine. If one cog is slightly off, that doesn't, you don't just, need to fix that cog necessarily. That's put strain on the rest of the machine for a long time. So if you're throwing in just tyrosine and you're not putting in more of the supportive nutrients, and you're not looking at the other areas of brain chemistry that it influences, then you can, in the long run, actually sort of upset things a bit more. So any kind of very targeted, very specific individual thing, I say give it a try, really hone in on what benefits you're looking for. Take a break regularly, so don't use it every day consistently. Stuff like omega-3s, multivitamins, probiotics every day, fine, safe, as long as it's good quality. But stuff like tyrosine, or lots of people take tryptophan or 5-HTP to support the serotonin pathway, or like I just said, saffron. Saffron is wonderful, but don't take it every day, because you will adjust or you'll upset the balance. So you sort of want to do it in waves and take regular breaks. Did that answer your question?
And yeah, no, it did. I've got a few more for you. So alpha GPC.
Oh, alpha GPC is not actually one I know a huge amount about. I would say go and do your research, because yeah, I've heard like there are good things coming out, but I personally haven't tested it yet. And I usually like to try things myself and do a little bit of research before I wander off into the abyss and start recommending it.
L-theanine.
So L-theanine is like tyrosine, another amino acid, but it's really good because it's meant to help calm you down. And I recommend L-theanine quite widely, but I recommend it as part of like a B complex with magnesium and zinc and other minerals that work synergistically. But yeah, L-theanine, I'm yet to come across sort of negative implications for that, whereas things like tyrosine, tryptophan, those kinds of things, because they directly influence your brain chemistry by actually allowing you to make more, they can have a knock-on effect. Whereas L-theanine, yes, I'd say is one of the ones that I'm like, if you fancy it, give it a try, and it's relatively safe.
Got it. Okay, I think that is probably gonna where we'll wrap things up. Thanks for all of your input today, Sophie. It's been very, very interesting. I think, I guess the best way to leave it is where do you think the future of the research into ADHD relating to sort of diet and nutrition is going, and what can we look forward to?
Yeah, hopefully very exciting things ahead. I think a lot of it's going to be very much down to personalizing, getting into people's individual genetics, understanding, you know, vitamin and mineral status of the individual. So and correlating, like if the world was my oyster and I had, money was no object, I would want to do like studies that actually look at all of the nutrients involved in ADHD brain chemistry and correlate different levels in people's bodies with the symptom severity, and then look at, well, okay, we've here is our baseline. What happens when we put in more of this or more of this or adjust this? So very much personalization, I hope, and yeah, ideally more research into the genetic underpinnings and how nutrition can positively influence that.
Yep. Fantastic. And then if anybody wants to get some coaching from you personally, how do they get in touch?
You can email me at hello@sophietully.com, or you can just go to sophietully.com and book yourself a free discovery call via my website.